This is the Freeheel Life podcast, number 17. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we are back. I'm back. Rolling solo today. And it's an interesting time in the world right now. And I'm was looking forward to just sitting down by myself and kind of reflecting on a few things and talking to you guys. I think probably a lot's changed, and I kind of wanted to do this as close to the drop date as possible, just because I thought it would be a little more appropriate with how things are going out there. But as we always start with the newsroom, I think the biggest news right now is that we around the world right now are dealing with the coronavirus. And it's pretty interesting how this is a completely unprecedented chain of events that in our lifetime, and probably at least a few generations. So probably any living person probably doesn't remember anything quite like this. But what was pretty wild is kind of the quick effect. Well, I shouldn't say quick, because we kind of were watching it through Europe, and I know here in the United States, at least in the ski world, in the mountain world, and here at the shop, when things started happening, they started happening pretty quick. We'd been watching it actually probably since mid-January. I'd kind of started paying attention to it, and then as we kind of got more into the early mid parts of February, we started kind of talking about it more as a shop. So we actually ended up closing the Freeheel Life shop a week ago, and it was difficult, more because it was abrupt, but it was definitely the right decision, just because we have so many people visiting the shop and whatnot. And, that's always a difficult decision to close, but it's not worth putting anyone at risk, to keep a Telemark ski shop open, in my opinion. So, but what was even kind of crazier is, we had seen some of the European ski resorts starting to close, obviously in Italy, because they had already been locked down. And then I think we made a decision to close on Friday. By Saturday, resorts began closing here in the United States. And that's definitely something I've never seen, and probably no one else. So that's been a fascinating thing to see, and extremely unfortunate. So in kind of a not so fun way, that's sort of the news right now. So if anybody listens to this later down the road, that's what was going on right now, is all ski resorts worldwide are closed. So I know some people are getting out in the backcountry, and that's been good to see. People getting out and enjoying the mountains when they can. Other people are on lockdown and not being able to enjoy the spring snow. I know there's a lot of shops out there and a lot of businesses as well that are struggling to try to figure out how to adapt in such a different environment, and the ability to not be able to go into their shops, or obviously things have changed so drastically. So I encourage all of you guys out there, if your local shops are still letting you order online, or maybe you can pick something up at the door. I know I think I saw a shop, Ute Mountaineer, I think in Aspen. I think that was today's post. It may have changed by the point that you listen to this in a few days, but I know they're trying to adapt by saying, hey, you can purchase things, from the doorway and whatnot. And these are all options and things that can help. So as we kind of get into this, I kind of wanted to do something that kind of a mix. I had some more or less want to get on and talk to you guys, do a little mailbag episode. But I wanted to start things off by, I really had my thoughts on some of our Italian friends, and they've been on lockdown for a number of weeks now, and it's pretty surreal outside looking in. And I know here in the United States we're heading to that direction. Some places in California and New York and Washington are already there, and this is kind of it's kind of a uncharted territory. So I know a lot of us are, looking for things to do and whatnot. So today I thought I would kind of kick things off with reading a portion of a piece that I wrote about an incredible event I went to in Italy. And I wrote this for Telemark Skier magazine. It came out in the December 2011 issue when it was still a print magazine. And it is all about the Scufons del COGO. And the Scufons run the Scufoneda Festival outside of Moena, Italy. And I kind of had forgotten about this little piece. And then as I was kind of thinking about them when they were on my mind today, I was thinking this could be kind of a fun way to share something about a beautiful country and a beautiful people, and an incredible event that unfortunately was canceled along with most ski events and mountain related events. But I thought this was a good homage to better times when we could gather, and I think that's been such a big part of our community over the years. And this was kind of one of those fun stories that I was able to go to that event. And without further ado, I guess I'll read you this little part. And it's kind of a fun little story. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but kind of gives you a good little glimpse into this area in Italy and kind of where these guys came from. The 3-hour drive on the winding roads from the 60s throwback airport in Verona traverses through wine country, past castles on hilltops and through small villages. From the valley floor, we rise 3,500 vertical feet into the Dolomites en route to Moena, home of the Scufons, the Hells Angels of the Freeheel world, from what I've been told. The old buildings along the cobblestone streets are exactly the picturesque scenes I've imagined. The town is calm, dark, quiet, almost solemn, with the only sound that of the river, which reflects the silhouettes of towering peaks of dolomitic limestone. Moena lies in the Fascia Valley. Its nearly 2,000 mountain people claim Latin, not Italian, as their official language. Latin consists of several dialects often associated with Rhaeto-Romance language that dates back to the Middle Ages. I'm from Utah, so old to me means mid-1800s. It's difficult not to be enamored and captured by each scene illustrating such a long past. From Moena, our 30-minute drive arcs through several roundabouts and old narrow roads to the Hotel Monzoni on the mountainous pass of San Pellegrino. The driver helps unload the bags into the lobby, where a beautiful girl, Jasmine, checks me in at the front desk. The key she hands me is like a house key in the States. There isn't a key card or electronic system, and you have to check your key at the desk when you leave the hotel. I get an intimate, homey feeling, and a sense of family pervades. It doesn't take much time to find Nick DeVore down in the cafe next to the lobby. He's drinking cappuccino. The plan is to head back into Moena in search of the Scufoneda kickoff party. There may even be a dance party and some beverages afterwards. I don't dance, but I figured Nick might get his groove on while I drink some whiskey. Devore and I wander through the streets of Moena to a small plaza where a large outdoor movie screen is set up. Several tents line the perimeter of the stone-paved area. Smoke and steam puff out of the tents like giant bellows. The food aromas are heavenly. The only thing that rivals the Telemark vibe of the place is its culinary acumen. A man to the left towers over the other people in the crowd. Smiling and attentive to the festival's new arrivals, he makes his way over to us. Felice is not just a cop. He's the cop, the chief of police here. The fact that he runs law enforcement as well as one of the premier Telemark events in the world is amazing. I refrain from accosting him with a line of questioning about how to acquire a job of this caliber for my own. It is tempting, but I don't. He greets us and welcomes us to the big event. In the early 1990s, we saw very little Telemark skiing in northern Italy, and it was relatively obscure at that point, he says. So in 1997, he and a few friends took an informal group and made it into a formal club called the Scufons. It's now comprised of hundreds of people, with individuals from all walks of life, local merchants, ski bums, policemen, and ski guides. One of those ski guides, Paolo, will take us on some of the most amazing terrain I've ever hoped to ski. Open powder bowls, steep couloirs, and even an old series of trails used by the Italian military in World War I to combat invaders from the north. It is a one-of-a-kind experience. Nick and I won't make it back to the Hotel Monzoni the first night. We realize the taxis quit running from Moena to Passo San Pellegrino earlier than we are willing to depart the Kusk, the local bar and dance joint. Instead, we procure accommodations with some new friends in the area. Early the next morning, we make a zombie-like march to the meeting point to begin the first ski day. A few snickers and giggles come our way as we show up sans ski gear while still wearing the same clothes we wore the night before. We return the smiles in kind. The night was well worth the story. The best part about this area of Italy, is the web of interconnected ski hills scattered amongst the jagged peaks. The Super Ski Dolomiti ski pass costs around €50 and provides access to over 1,200 kilometers of skiable terrain and 450 ski lifts at 12 resorts. The vast expanse of terrain could easily take you weeks to explore. The group leaves us behind in Moena with vague directions to a cabin called Spartico's, where we'll meet for lunch. 45 minutes later, ski gear in hand, and it's time to grab a bus down the road. Nick seems to have a pretty good nose for finding his way around, but I'm skeptical since neither of us have ever been here. With so much area to cover, we either have to figure it out or accept being lost in these magnificent mountains. At this point, it is necessary to view either scenario as a potential victory. As we ascend into the air during our first lift ride, it's more apparent how vast the area truly is. It also dawns on me how hard it's going to be to find Spartico's cabin amongst the seemingly infinite valleys and peaks ahead of us. It feels good to get our legs under us again, weaving in and out of the Euro carving masses on the slopes becomes a game. They move much slower, so it's almost like negotiating slalom gates. Many of the runs are above the tree line, which leaves giant open spaces to explore. The locals seem to stick to the groomed portion of the runs. This means untouched snow and features on the sides of the runs for us to play on. After a long plane ride and even longer night on the town, this is the perfect medicine. Almost an hour goes by, and we begin to wonder how we actually are going to find this small cabin and meet up with the rest of our group. We weren't even given a description of what Spartico's cabin even looked like. Another lift ride to the top of the closest peak, which overlooks several other ski valleys below, seems in order. At the top, Devore points to a series of cabins a few miles away and matter-of-factly states that he thinks that one of them is Spartico's. I'm again skeptical, but we don't really have any other choices. There are trees with some soft snow, and we get fresh turns as we cut down through the switchbacks of cat tracks below us. As we near the small cabin, oddly placed in the middle of a ski run, we see the raised wine glasses of our smiling friends. They are in awe that we have found Spartico's old rustic wooden haven. The afternoon is spent drinking wine and eating an array of cheeses and smoked meats. When it comes time to leave, the sun is going down and the lifts are already closed. A small group of us decide to descend the hill to the next village where a bus back to Moena is waiting. Then it is out on the town with the rest of the group for another Scufon event. The festival is so ingrained in the fabric of the community that wherever one goes in or around Moena, the party continues the entire time. So that's a little snippet of my piece on the Scufons. And wow, that brings back some amazing memories of such an incredible place. If you haven't been to the Dolomites, they are some of the most incredible mountains to see in person. Incredibly dramatic and vast. And it's kind of funny to think about that little story because it's funny to reread it this many years later because it really was funny that we were looking for Spartico's cabin. And it I still think to this day reading that, I'm not totally sure how we found that place, but we did. And what an incredible time. And all the other Italian festivals too, it makes me think of, and I know they're not happening this year as well, but La Schieda in Livigno in northern Italy, so many amazing experiences at that. Even a cool one, Valsenales, which is in the South Tyrol area of Austria. So I guess that's kind of on the border. And there's so many other European festivals. I guess I shouldn't just focus on the Italian ones, but obviously I just read that piece from the Scufons, from Scufoneda. But just so many amazing festivals that unfortunately are not going to happen this year. And it brings me an incredible amount of joy just to read that stuff and remember all those memories. And that's really what that's all about, is that level of community that we have out there. And I just want you guys to know, if anybody from Italy or Europe, if you're listening, we're thinking about you, and hang in there. So hopefully you enjoyed that little anecdotal story. I don't think I have that one online yet, but this is a good reminder for me to put the whole thing online, and hopefully you guys can check out the whole thing at some point and learn more about Scufoneda and make plans for next year, because we all should go there. I think I'm going to do a couple questions that have come in. I had kind of a partial mailbag episode ready to go, and I figured today was maybe just a little hodgepodge of putting together a story and talk a little bit of Telemark and keep the blood flowing, because I know that I'm still thinking about snow. I'm still thinking about mountains, and I'm sure you are too. And people have sent in some pretty good questions. So this first one's from Christopher in Juneau, Alaska. He said, I'm curious if there are print copies of Telemark Skier magazine still out there, and if you know how I could get a hold of some copies. I'm someone who learns by immersion, meaning reading, watching movies, you name it. It dawned on me I missed out on some great magazines, and thus I thought I would check with all of you, given Josh worked for the magazine, and see if you had any ideas. Even PDF versions would be cool for me. So kind of on that note, if you go to telemarkskier.com, yes, there are some print issues left. I've got a few here at the shop. If you write us an email and we can probably work out some postage and send you a couple copies of some extras. I've got a few kicking around. The majority, not majority, maybe I guess is not the best way, because there are some older issues prior to my time when Craig Dostie actually was the owner. They go all the way back to 2003. Some of those articles are not online. I have tried to put some on, as many as I can, onto telemarkskier.com. So instead of PDF versions, you might be able to find some on there. And that's kind of been an ongoing project of transferring over some of that older content, like some of these stories like that. I mean, they're timeless, and would love to get those up there. As far as gear reviews and things like that, there's probably more modern versions of those that you can find. Also, the YouTube account, what we've tried to do is kind of morph all the video content into the YouTube account, which you can find under Telemark Skier Magazine. And that's also got the Freeheel Life Telemark Shop videos on there as well. And that kind of allows us to have both sort of the magazine review style stuff and also sort of the shop tech videos and whatnot. You can kind of find it all in one place. It's all part of the Freeheel Life Industries family. But that's a good question, Chris. And I hope I hope that stuff helps, and definitely drop us a line. You can always email podcast@freeheellife.com. I can send you some old print magazines and you can check them out. The next question is from Tim. Doesn't have a location. It says, "Hey guys, I'm really getting into the podcast from down here in Australia. Last winter, I saw a couple of guys carving some turns on tele skis and thought, wow, that looks so cool. So I rented a pair, and yeah, I sucked. But I was thinking of making the jump and getting set up and only tele skiing this winter. One thing that worries me, though, is that at least once per season, I have a crash decent enough that both skis pop off. But tele bindings don't release, so I'm worried I'll hurt my knees." And that's a good question. First off, glad you're down in Australia and you got winter ahead of you. And hopefully that'll all be intact, because I would love to see you guys skiing this winter. And yeah, that's a really good question that comes up. We've started kind of covering that. I think that's probably going to be a pretty frequent question that pops up here and there. Releasability of the bindings. It always comes up with gear reviews. It comes up in terms of, is it safer for your knees and whatnot. So if you're just getting in to Telemark, and this is kind of, you might want to go back and listen to the 75 millimeter versus NTN podcast that I've done. Kind of gives you a little bit of entrance into that realm of these different norms and whatnot. As far as releasability, there's, and I think we've been asked this before. I'm sure this will be like the mailbag question that constantly comes up. But the reality of it is for so many, for 30 years, there was virtually no release. Yes, there was a few things here and there, but most telemark bindings didn't release. People just kind of accepted it as part of the deal. But there are some bindings in the NTN category that work well. The Rotafella Freeride does have a release system, a more up-to-date version in NTN that I think is probably one of the best release systems, I think, is in the Majo. It is a Tecto NTN binding, though. We just did a podcast about Lynx and Majo and Tecto in general, so you may want to listen to that one. But as far as the release system and how they separate it from the tension of the springs on the bindings, I think that's one of the better options. I just like how the M equipment did that and Pierre engineered it. It's just a really cool way to really get what you want, but still have the release ability. So yeah, look at the M equipment. Majo 3.0 is going to be coming out, and I don't know what kind of distribution they have in Australia, but that's an option. If you want to stick to the 75 millimeter realm and absolutely need release ability, you could go all the way back to like Volet CRB. Not super easy to find. I know there's a Telebri. Or Telebri, that's a company. I don't know too much about those guys, but there are release plates that you can get for various bindings there. The Outlaw X from 22 Designs, the verbiage is it can release. It's very similar to the Rotofella Freeride. So catastrophic falls, if you keep it on a low setting, like a 1 or a 2, depending on your weight, you can probably pop out. But like I said, as far as having sort of a better ability to like manage, not compromising the stiffness of your spring setting, the Majo honestly probably has one of the better setups. So hopefully that helps. And releasability, like I said, is probably going to come up pretty frequently with us over the years. All right. This one's from Sean in Seattle. It says, "Hi, Freeheel Life podcast. I'm loving the podcast. Thanks for doing what you do. In one of your episodes, you were asking for questions for your mailbag. The last few years, I've been trying to attend more tele festivals and gatherings and have really been enjoying them. What are some of your favorite tele festivals and gatherings that you have visited?" Well, I guess that's a pretty good question because I was just talking about Scufoneda and some of the Euro ones. I'd say most of my experiences are probably based in Europe or the United States. I was just trying to rack my brain and think if I've been to anything outside of there. I guess I have been to South America. There was a Patagonia Telemark Festival for a little bit. I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but it did happen at one point. So the top ones that come to mind, you're in Seattle. I know there's some ones in, it sounded like one started in 49 degrees north in, over by Schweitzer. So that'd be outside the Spokane area. That might be one to check out if you haven't been to that one. I don't know much about it, but I did catch wind that there was something going on. Oregon has a couple. The Screamin' Telly Lizard, which unfortunately just got postponed this year, but that's a fun one. That's down in Ashland, Oregon. There used to be one at Hoodoo, Oregon, that kind of turned from Telefest into Backcountry or BC Fest. I'm not sure if that's still going on. There's some domestic ones though in the Pacific Northwest. If you're looking, and this is I just went to Midwest Telefest, the 30th annual. That was amazing. And I think it really depends on what you're looking for in a festival. Are you looking to just go get mad vertical, get crazy, go to the steepest resort? Or like when I went to Midwest Telefest, I went to the Porcupine State Park that had one lift, and I had a blast. And honestly, part of what makes good telemark festivals for me is just meeting rad people. And I always like to kind of, and I've been telemarketing for so long that it's almost like I still have this little theory that I like to test, where when I go to a festival in some far off place, like Porcupine State Park, literally on the edge of Lake Superior. It felt far. It felt like I was in the middle of nowhere. And I like to test this theory of telemark that I always tell people, like, it's a personality choice. It's not a logistical choice. And what I mean by that is people, I think in this day and age, when you tell somebody that you do something, their immediate response is, well, why is it better? Or what makes it better? And I think with telemark, I always try to explain to people, like, especially in the context of skiing, they're like, well, if it's different than alpine, well, what makes it better? Why would you do it? And you're like, yeah, it's just different. And it's hard to explain. So I guess that's kind of why I started explaining to people, like, it's really just a personality choice. I used to explain it back in the day. I'd say it's like being the bass player in the band and you don't want to be the lead guitar player. You kind of just want to be the different guy, or girl. And you want to hold the rhythm down, but you don't necessarily need to be up front and, locking it in for the stadium, crowd or whatever. So I always like to test that theory whenever I'm traveling around. I like to know why people do it, because we're all from these incredibly different areas around the world. And I think that's the most fascinating thing to me, is that we all kind of vibe on these very similar things. The first minute, most people, like, this is kind of a good test you get talking about, is like, I remember the first time I linked turns. And it's like almost every tele skier that's been into it for a while can look back and go, yeah, I remember that exact moment. And it's life-changing. And I think that's what you do, is you get people like that. And that's why telemark festivals are fun. You get a bunch of crazy people together that all have the same kind of passion for the one thing. So sometimes I don't necessarily think a telemark festival is as much about crazy vert or location as much as it's about meeting people that are super psyched about being telemark skiers. So yeah, domestically, there's those. There's not a whole lot going on the East Coast right now. I know there's a couple small ones, and some demo tours. And as far as Europe goes, Scufoneda, like I mentioned, amazing event. The telemark only event is a really fun one to go to. That's where only telemark skiers are allowed. And basically what happens is and I'll probably have Paul Fluke. He is the organizer and came up with this great idea, because the resort in the Schiltorn had already closed, and then he's able to rent it out for the weekend after the closure, and then only allows telemark skiers to come. And it's cool. It's like a private tele event. That's one of the most unique ones I've been to, for sure, because you basically only let tele guys and girls up there to go shred around. So that's a fun one. Black Shoes Festival ties in well nicely to that. That is in Tignes in France. And we love those guys. I love them. And one of their main organizers, Canard, recently passed away. So I just want to mention that. Much respect to him, because he was an incredible visionary to get that thing going. And it's been around for nearly 30 years as well. So the Black Shoes in France, La Schieda, Northern Italy. Man, I could go on and on. There's so many cool, awesome ones. And then I've mentioned going to Morgedal in Norway, if you can. Not necessarily a festival, but a good pilgrimage to make if you're a diehard tele fanatic. And always like to mention that one. So thanks for the question, Sean. Hopefully that helps you kind of spark the brain and get on Google Earth and start surfing around and figure out stuff. And I know we've talked about doing a little bit better of an events calendar next year. All right, Steve from Marquette wrote in. He said, "Hey guys, wondering if you have any suggestions on aftermarket boot liners. I'm on my second pair of BD push boots and was thinking of throwing a new pair of liners in just to give a little refresh. I'm familiar with some of the Intuition liners, but was wondering if there is anything else you recommend. Thanks for the suggestions and look forward to the podcast." And he said, "See you at Midwest Telefest," which I was just talking about. So at the shop, generally, Steve, we're probably 9 times out of 10, we're probably pointing people to Intuition, like you were mentioning. My take on boots is this: Scarpa comes stock with Intuition. Crispy liners sometimes, and this is me watching customers, not necessarily my personal opinion. Most people don't like the liners. They're kind of paper thin. And a lot of people pull them out and put Intuition liners in there. Scott boots, kind of the same thing. Not the stock liners, not that fantastic. I feel like some people go with it, but I don't think it's as durable. People tend to change them. The BD liner that you have in the push, it's got a BOA enclosure. It's a little bit beefier, full volume. I feel like the Intuition liner is probably a good bet for that kind of situation. And you could just go with a regular tongue liner. Another option, I don't know much about zip liners, but I have heard some customers that are more apt to have really specific boot style liners is they will go with zip fit. And that's kind of the extent of my boot fitting. And yeah, like I said, 9 times out of 10 going Intuition, and that's usually a good fit for everything there. So hopefully that helps. All right, guys, last one. This is from Jeff in Washington. He says, "Do you have any suggestions for improving your turns on the weak side? I'm getting better at turns, but feel weak turning to the left. Right foot forward, left foot forward feels pretty good. Any help, greatly appreciated." And loves listening to the podcast every week. So thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Let it be known. There's always a weak side. And when I was teaching telemark lessons a long time ago, I think that was the first time I really recognized that everyone has a weak side. And it's just kind of one of those things. Like, you're gonna be really good going one direction, and the other direction it's gonna be you're gonna flub it up a little bit. And what I like to do personally is take some time and pick out drills that kind of create more of a single motion of the turn and sort of do them to one side. So I think in this case you're saying turning to the left. So what I would do in that particular case is literally kind of, even if you can, just brace your poles in front of you so you're facing downhill down the fall line, and really practice just letting yourself go for a few feet, maybe like 10 feet, and then make a hard, solid turn to the left to a stopping position. Then reset up and do the next thing. So basically that way you're not in this constant state of motion, but you can kind of control your environment. And that's one technique that you can do, is really just practice the full turn. And I've said this in the past, but I think the cool thing about a telemark turn is it's all about dropping and committing all at once. If you kind of, and this is especially back in the day when the gear wasn't as good, there's a danger zone. And if you try to sort of like alpine telly in kind of the middle, and you don't just commit to the turn fully and get, kind of a your spacing between your heel to toe of your 2 feet, you're toast. And so committing all at once and kind of like breaking down these little sections of the turn, I think are really valuable. That way you're sort of like practicing, instead of trying to go like, oh, I'm making a right-hand turn and my left sucks. Oh, I'm making a right-hand turn and my left sucks. Is like stop yourself and just spend like 15 minutes and just literally drill, left turn, stop, left turn, stop, and then try to link a few and then drill again, left turn, stop, and take 15, 20 minutes out of your ski day and do that. There's some other pressure drills and stuff like that where you can practice just kind of sliding down the hill in a telly stance, facing to that left-hand side, learning pressuring the ball of the foot. It's kind of a little difficult to describe here, but that's another way. But the overall idea is break the motion down into smaller pieces so that you're not dealing with all of these variables at once, and get after it. Practice, I always like to say, practice doesn't make practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. So breaking it into smaller pieces always helps. So, all right, you guys. Well, thanks for letting me just get on here and talk to you guys. And I love our Telemark community, and in such a crazy, crazy time, I am so psyched that you guys are all out there, and I really, really appreciate you guys listening. And hopefully your lockdown, quarantine, in your house, stressed out situation isn't getting too crazy and too hectic. And I hope that you were able to get a little bit of enjoyment from listening to this today. And like I said, we're still open. If you want to support the podcast, the best way to do it is check out freeheellife.com. Right now we're doing buy one, get one free on like t-shirts and hoodies, hats, drinkware. You can use the coupon code SPRINGBOGO at checkout and get a deal there. That's going to be going on until it's all gone. So hopefully if you listen to this a few weeks from now, it's still there. You can check out new articles on telemarkskier.com. We got some cool stuff that we're putting stuff up there weekly still. And you can always let me know how I'm doing. Send in more questions at podcast@freeheellife.com. Telemark's rad, you guys. And I love it. And I love you guys. Thanks for listening. And until I talk to you next time, spread Telemark always the best way you can. Peace.